Welcome to another episode of the UKAI Business of AI podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined by Michael Smith from Sagittal this morning. So, Michael, it's a pleasure to have you here. We've actually known each other for quite a few years and worked together in the past, but I'm really excited to learn more about Sagittal. And so could you introduce yourself and maybe tell us a bit about what Sagittal is and what the services you provide?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Tim, and I'm very excited to push behind UKAI's mission. And so, yes, I'm Michael Smith. I'm the CEO of Sagittal AI. We're based here in London, and I met my co-founder when we worked together way back in handsets in 2010-ish timeframe, working on Android handsets. So what Sagittal AI does is automation for the software development lifecycle. So what that means is you can bring an AI into your team that does software product development. So think designers, engineers, of course, testers, QA, management, all that kind of thing. So you bring an AI into that group, and then this AI lifts all of the kind of mundane tasks, but also helps you automate everything it can. So imagine having an AI team member that meets your human team where they are and then is able to complete tasks. The main difference between what we offer and what a lot of other people are currently offering is our AI integrates with your team's tools and processes that already exist. So we integrate with like Jira, GitHub, Notion, Figma, Google Docs, and you add our AI just like another human. And then our AI completes full tasks. So you assign a task to it, such as, let's say we want to take a Jira ticket and turn it into a full pull request and complete code. Then what our AI does is tries to get all the context it can from all the existing tools, just like a normal human being would. Then it uses an LLM to complete the task. Then it puts the results right back in the tools. So it is a real collaborative team kind of player, and it even follows your standards that you have documented throughout your documentation. So if you've got a Confluence document that says we tend to code this way, always make sure you write tests in this way, following best practices, and it can be almost it can kind of be your exemplary team member. Now, it's not going to be able to. We don't pretend that AI can do everything that a team can do. You absolutely need the human beings there to make the judgment calls. But what an AI can do is anything that is slightly mechanistic, it can lift. But in order to do that, it needs to be in your existing team's tools and processes.
The interesting word you used there was team. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you're approaching the concept of building a sort of hybrid team between humans and machines, because we're right at the beginning of this whole change in the way which teams operate. And we're seeing the emergence of protocols like MCP, which will allow the transfer of this information between agents and other systems. So you must be building this, like literally brick by brick, and pioneering this. I'd love to hear what are some of the challenges you're facing, both in terms of the human challenges, but also some of the technical challenges in integrating this new team member into those teams.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I can think of a couple different dimensions, see if I can remember them all, because your question was good and it made me think of about 5 different things at the same time. So one of which is that one of the biggest challenges here is that early adopters are humans, not teams, and not companies. So there is an advantage right now for AIs that are kind of targeted at an individual, in that a individual who's an early adopter can go pick it up and kind of play with it. It's harder to get a whole team to get that kind of spirit working together. However, that is really where the huge gains are going to come from. And when you drop an AI into a team, the real benefit is that it can clear up work. Let's say you and I are working on something collectively. Well, it's one thing for me to speed up my work, and it's another thing for you to speed up your work. Even if we're both using AI, what would be even better is if there was an AI working between us and we could throw it back and forth to it as a third member. Then it could do work on both of our behalves a hell of a lot faster. So we end up killing a lot of clock time, a lot of wall clock time, as opposed to just changing like human time on task. And we can address more human time on task as well. The challenge here is one that this requires an organization to want to actually make that big change and create that burning platform inside, and for the team members to be able to kind of make that occur. The benefit here is that we can all collectively really explore how, I think when we take a customer the whole way through this, the team really understands how they are more useful than an AI alone. And they really can position themselves into the proper thing. Oh, that's what an AI can do for us collectively. And this is what I can never give to an AI. And that actually ends up being extraordinarily useful.
Yeah, I was find it really interesting hearing about these kind of dynamics, because again, it's kind of very much something which is a new field, understanding this hybrid team organizational dynamic. And something you said was really interesting there, which was about the collective benefits. So when you're trying to drive any type of change, you try and frame it in terms of the benefits which the individual has. But here, you're right, the opportunity is to frame it as how it's going to benefit the entire team and their efficiency, and then being able to communicate and pull things together. So that's then, I suppose, where it comes back to integrating into the existing tools. So where are we in terms of being able to get all the tools to sync up? Because I know that I'm trying to sort of struggle to get all of my various different tools to sync up via an API. And yes, there's things like Zapier that you can bolt things together, but where are we as generally in terms of the technology that allows us to bolt all these things together? Because you must be trying to do all of that in order to make this work.
100%. And I guess it's worth backing up just a smidge to say that both me and my co-founder have done a lot of CTO and chief product officer roles. And therefore, we actually believe that the unit of value addition is really the team. And I think that's one that management studies have really shown, that an effective team is what delivers value to an organization. And we don't believe that's going to change with AI, because it's really that diversity of thought and that diversity of skill which actually brings a team to effectiveness. So we reject the fact that you can have a single person in an AI and it will be as good. So we believe that it's still going to be multiple people in an AI that's going to be as good. But as far as the integration of multiple different tools, what we find super interesting is that now people are playing around with MCP servers, which is the Model Context Protocol, by which AIs can call out to other tools. First of all, very rarely is that done in a team collaborative context. But more importantly, that MCP usually means, so in a coding environment, what this normally means is I download my code to my laptop. Okay, we all know that that's already a little bit of a security risk, but we deal with it because you mess with an IDE and you are doing your software development right on your machine. But what MCP says is then you run this unsecure thing on your laptop next to it, and then that is your AI that you communicate with. By the way, I don't keep track of which parts are done by the AI. I don't keep track of the security hole that just opened, shoving my code off to the side. So we actually believe that the better way to do that is to actually bring an AI formally into the organization. This is why, look, when we started this company, we knew full well that the whole world was going to come running at coding with AI, right? That was written down for a long period of time already. And we thought, shoot, this is not necessarily where we would like to start, but what's beautiful about the software environment, software development stack, and with that I include everything from like product creation all the way through QA and deployment, is all of those tools have spent like a decade or two becoming API-able or accessible, so that almost everything a human can do with the SaaS tools, a program can do off to the background. So that's partially why we went after this particular domain. We also know a lot about it, so we have a lot to encode in the value proposition there. But it really requires an integration in with these tools so that an AI can actually be very effective and do. It's one thing to be able to pull the context, but it's even harder to be able to understand how an AI should change the working product that we collectively use by putting the information back in the tools. Let me give you a concrete example. We can, for example, look at your code base and generate UML diagrams and diagrams around your code and how it works, and put it into a Notion document. Well, when I do that, should I just blow away your existing document? Should I kind of insert some code? Should I kind of do this? And like human beings are okay at that judgment call, but we have to figure out a way to make that occur. And I think if you were to try to do something that fluent in legal or marketing or customer operations, it's a little trickier because the APIs are a little bit tougher in that world, and it becomes a little bit more challenging.
Yeah. So in terms of the narrowness or the broadness of this solution, then, could you sort of maybe give me your perspective on how you're using this to solve particular tasks, or is it more about trying to solve systems? And we talked about how it works from a human perspective, but I'm just interested now from almost like the tech solutions. I mean, is it you're trying to get? It sounds like you're trying to solve whole system problems here.
Well, we are trying to solve whole systems problems, but in the domain of software development, because mainly we understand software development, and because those tools are give us the ability to add that fluency to an AI that is very hard elsewhere. We do believe that this pattern is reproducible elsewhere. We're just kind of like doing it like, for example, you could actually create a team-based legal review system or a team-based customer success system. Those are actually fairly natural, or team-based marketing system. And but the challenge of that is you would actually love the AI to meet the humans. One of our taglines is, adapting AI to humans. And the reason we say that is because it's easier for us as a company to do the little bit of coding it takes, little additional bits of coding it takes to get an AI to meet the humans in the tools that they work well in now, than it is to retrain an entire organization to kind of revamp the way that they work. And I also don't believe that's going to bring out the fluency. We spent decades designing our existing ways of working that are about bringing out the best in humans. And so I think you want to keep that pattern. And what you want to do is augment AI across as many tools as possible, because almost every job discipline requires multiple tools. And you need AI to be able to work across these tools to really be efficient and pull information from one system to then be able to use in another system. So there are technical challenges to overcome there, but I think they are, the technical challenges are known unknowns, and the transformations you would have to do to human beings are unknown unknowns, and as well as being like, they start disempowering human creativity and what the humans can bring to that process.
It sounds like the interface would be really important there as well, because we're talking about this whole system and the various different parts of it, but actually being able to have an effective interface for the team member to ask questions, to get the data back, get visualizations of it. That's going to be really key. But also then the context window, I'm not sure whether that's the right term in this context, but the ability to understand what you as a user are trying to achieve, and remember how that kind of links back to what you were asking previously, and other team members learning from that. Are you building that into the platform as well, or that sort of interface and that sort of memory?
Well, a little bit. So a little bit to the first, and absolutely to the second. So to the first one, to the interface changes, we actually are trying to lean into the existing tools as much as possible, but we do want to make sure that we never forget that the AI is an AI. And so we try to make it very mechanical and very almost dry and automated in its responses to human beings, which I tell you what, the AIs generally speaking are not. And they are also like, sycophantic, and they are like way too aggressively helpful.
Weeks ago, wasn't there, where it just went totally sycophantic for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, and we've had this problem all the time. It's like, so for example, if we notice that people will respond to our products with Neo, they will respond to Neo's insertion of like Neo will complete a task, and then somebody will say thank you, and then Neo goes, okay, so assume that means you want me to do more work, and then it goes and so we had to like explicitly say, we had to put some classifiers in there to be like, did this person actually ask you to do anything? And if not, just politely reply and say, I'm done, right? And so we had to put that kind of thing in there. So that's an example of where I think the interface is very important. And we have to be very clear about how AI does it and how AI is weird right now. Like it'll do the wrong thing. Doesn't have great judgment all the time. And the second part of your question was, sorry, I forgot that.
Memory, how you're able
memory,
to
yes.
understand and remember and to contextualize it.
And I think that what we've seen is if you took a very smart human being, just off the rack, right, just generically smart person, doesn't understand this particular context, then gave them the entirety of your code base and all of the documents in your organization to read, how good are they going to be at getting stuff done? And the answer is like, they're not going to be dumb, but they're not necessarily going to actually follow a process that makes any sense whatsoever. So we spend a lot of time encoding a process, and Neo, more than anything, is an orchestrator of the things that you do. So let me give you a concrete example. It reads the ticket, it reads the other things that the ticket refers to, and it understands that context. Then we send it off to decide which files it should consider and which ones it might not consider. And then given that, we then start looking at the coding process. Like what we just did there was we're taking little snippets of it and we're kind of like cueing the LLM with what is important at the time in the process. Another good example is we rip apart, like I said, we have Neo understand what is important to you in the coding process. So we ask you to onboard Neo with documentation written in natural language that then we rip apart or Neo rips apart and inserts that into queues in the large language models at the right times where it needs to care about those standards of coding. It obviously doesn't need to care about the standards of coding while it's reading the context of your ticket, but it does when it's actually generating code. So you can throw the whole world at an LLM. And the one thing that they've shown is that it's one thing to find a needle in a haystack. It's another thing to find a needle in a needle stack. So that is a conceptual problem sometimes in LLMs. And when you've got a whole bunch of relevant data, but you haven't narrowed it down, then actually the LLM tends to drive off a cliff very quickly. So we spend a lot of time trying to orchestrate that. I don't think anything in the near future is as simple as just make your context window 1 billion tokens long, throw the world at it, and then it will be able to do the right thing. I don't think that works with humans. I don't think that works with LLMs.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the security issue. You touched upon it a bit earlier on, and this is an area which we're increasingly seeing as being there's a big risk for organizations because they're moving into it very quickly. They're often looking at it in a very piecemeal way. You talked about some of the vulnerabilities when people just kind of put things into an LLM or they're bolting things together using an API or MCP, whatever it is they're doing, not really thinking about those as sources of weakness. So how are you sort of approaching that? Is there sort of like a way in which you help solve for that, or do you have a view on what the future will look like as the whole industry starts to mature a little bit? What sort of guardrails do you think we should be putting in place?
Well, I think that everyone's correct in becoming very aware of what it takes to. When you bring an AI into your system, you need to understand how much data it has access to and where that data is going to go. So there hasn't been a sane organization. Every sane organization asks us for our architecture diagram and how data flows, and that makes 100% sense. And what's funny is that when people say, "Oh, well, just get a ChatGPT subscription," they don't do that. That kind of mapping of like how that data is going to flow and what that really means to enable that person, it feels a little bit Wild West. And so there is just a generic security problem. We solve that by saying, when you install Neo as a team member into your company, Neo is a user. Neo, the model we use is a contractor. It is another actor. It won't work without your command. But similarly, it has the same tokens and authorization in your existing tool sets that a human does. So we use the same access control mechanisms that you would have with your humans right now, that we already know how to manage. So we think that's a very good model, and we don't see a lot of other people picking that up. There are some people who will, if I have the tool installed, like OpenAI has this, with their most recent addition into Google Drive, where I can allow OpenAI to access my Google Drive as me. But the problem with that is if you make it do work in there, then it does work as me, but now you end up with an accountability problem. So
Mm.
I think one thing that we really have to be aware of is AI can do things, and we need to trace back why it's doing it so that we can address the system and know where its insertion is actually very safe and its insertion is not safe. Which is why we're so excited about our solution, in that it is integrated in with existing software development lifecycle principles and double checks and processes. And therefore, if you have to do a code review, which everybody does, and AI checks in code, then a human must authorize it and validate it in the tools, just as they would with a normal human being. And then that AI has attribution of the fact that it generated it. A human has attribution of the fact that they validated it. And then that is how that occurred. There's an even subtler one, which is how humans, as AI gets better, we're going to get, and even right now, we're seeing this problem all over the place. There's a person who I heard of just last week, who tracks all the times where lawyers incorrectly attribute hallucinated documents to the court. So where they trust AI to make up a reference to something, and then they just copy and paste it into the court. So they misrepresent it. So the problem is that human beings, as AI gets anywhere good, and by the way, like, it's not bad now. So you're rolling the dice, but you're probably going to be better than 50. You are definitely going to be better than 50-50 if you just copy and paste what it says. But as it gets better and better, we're going to run into those cases more and more, where blindly accepting what's in the AI is going to cause a problem. So, for example, we're working with the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology to understand how we can help with secure DevOps programming environments. And one of the things I think is very important in that realm is the understanding of when you create a system that makes it super easy for humans to accept erroneous AI conclusions. And I think we cannot abdicate control to AI in many situations where we're currently doing that. I think there are places where actually, you know what, 80-20 is fine. Let's keep moving. Like agility is the problem. But I think we just have to be very conscious of when, you could be introducing a security error when you actually need to instead enforce a very stringent, well thought out review here.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I know the government through DCIT are doing some important work at looking at some of the risk analysis in AI systems from the cybersecurity angle, a lot of these topics. So that's probably one to follow up on as well, especially if you're already doing some work there. But I think also the point you're making about decision making, and specifically automated decision making, that's increasingly something of concern. And in fact, I was at an event at the House of Lords organised by the ICO yesterday, where they were talking about just this problem, which is, as we move to more automated decision making, what's the impact on privacy, and what's the impact on human rights, where some of these decisions are being made. That's obviously a bigger societal challenge, but within the construct of the solution you're providing, I think your solution is very neat, because you're putting it into the existing dev process, which has those points where humans have to review it anyway. But just as we start to wrap things up, I wanted to kind of touch on that societal piece, because I know that's an area that you're very keen on looking at. So what's your big view of where we are at the moment, and the impact that AI and the tools that you're making are going to have on society?
Yeah, I had a customer offhandedly tell me one time that they thought that the analogy between AI being as revolutionary as mobile and internet isn't as true as the AI being as revolutionary as the industrial revolution. And the more I think about that, the more I think that's actually very true. Mobile and internet really was kind of taking existing knowledge work and kind of digitizing it and making it a little bit more efficient, and kind of tweaking it here and there. The changes, it reinvented some jobs, but not as massive. Whereas the industrial revolution kind of revamped huge swaths of large amounts of work and kind of required a redefinition. But what's really interesting is the Industrial Revolution kind of more or less came in two phases between the 1700s and 1800s, and between the 1800s and 1900s, and each one was like 50 or 60 years. Between, on the one hand, like loom automation and steam engine, and the other one, like, electricity and chemical automations. And each one of those took 50 or 60 years. Do you think AI is going to be anywhere near as slow as that? And it could be much more impactful as far as its both rapidity, but also the reach that it has on the amount of different types of jobs. So this makes it super exciting, but it's also super fast. So it's in our hands to try to make it transformative or allow it to be ridiculously disruptive, both from a business standpoint and a government and societal standpoint. So I think I'm trying to very consciously address the first, and then take that as learnings into a group like UK AI, and then be able to kind of influence the societal and governmental thinking around that as well, given what we learn in the business side.
That's great. Thank you. And yeah, that's very much our mission, is being able to bring businesses like yours together to be able to kind of shape the industry that we want to work and live in. It's really important that we should be doing that, because you're right, the pace of change is enormous. And the Industrial Revolution, the way you analyzed it, is quite interesting. Because the societal changes were immense. I'm just thinking about how people moved from rural areas into towns, and the impact that had on, well, there were some good things that came out of it, but it was eventual, like education or like women's suffrage. But at the beginning of that process, there were real hardships. And there was this kind of period when it was the Wild West, when it was pure exploitation of the sort of the poorest and most vulnerable in society. And then over time, over that 100-year period, then you actually started to see industrialists be much more responsible and ethical. But that only came at the end of that process. And I suppose that the opportunity for us now is to say, which part of that 100-year process do we want to be at? The kind of commercial exploitative side, or the bit where they actually figure it out? And I'd like to think that we're more, as a society, we're more enlightened now, and that we want to be able to build some of those guardrails and ethical and responsible guardrails in at the beginning, rather than just figuring it out at the end. But
yeah, you say that, but I think the combination of like capitalism in its current very rampant state, with high disparity of wealth, and the power that ensues because of that, and the trends we're seeing, makes that something I think we need to be very conscious about as we're embarking on this. We don't want all the money to just flow upward even faster than it has over the last 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole podcast. We probably should do a whole podcast on just that topic. It's it's something we keep on going back to. But I think we'll have to wrap it up here for our podcast today, Michael. But could you tell us how we can stay in touch with you and find out more about Sagittal?
Yes, so we are at Sagittal.ai, which is SAGITTAL.ai. That's 1G, 2 T's. And you can also find me at Michael Smith on LinkedIn, but do not just search for Michael Smith. Put Sagittal in there as well. Otherwise, you're never going to find me, because there's a few Michael Smiths in the world. So yeah.
Good advice. Excellent. Well, Michael, it's been really interesting to talk about that. We've covered a lot of areas, and I think hearing about both the human and the technical side, and talking about some of those bigger societal changes as well, it's really getting into understanding how Agentic is going to start to revolutionize how we're all working. It's been fascinating. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm very thankful to be able to explore this space. I think we're all still learning it, and then be able to kind of bring it to a group like UK AI. So thank you for the opportunity.
That's great. Thank you, Michael.